Hello everyone, good morning for those of you in Europe and good afternoon for those of you in China. So welcome to the EU SME Center webinar series. Before we start with this webinar, I'm going to shortly introduce you the platform, the webinar platform. You have a console on the upper side of your screen, and you can see that there is a button where you can submit questions. I will encourage you to do so. We will have a Q&A section at the end of the webinar, so please send us your question. We will be very happy to answer them. If we don't do it during the webinar, we will do it through email later on. So a brief introduction about the EU SME Center. We are a project fully funded by the European Union, and the objective of the center is to help the European SMEs to get ready for China. We help them to export into China, establish, develop, and maintain commercial activities, and we also give advice and information. We do also provide some practical support services, and I will introduce them now. The center is divided in 4 blocks of information, knowledge. One is the business development. We also have legal, standards and conformity assessment, human resources, and training. On the information and advice services, we reply your inquiries. We do have publications. We have a knowledge center with more than 80 publications, and then we also organize training. We do trainings in Europe and in China. And of course, we do webinars like the one we're doing today. We have different databases. One of the popular ones is the exhibition database. We also have a service provider database. You can find companies offering professional services here in China to help you to enter the market. We are also developing a law database where you will find also a legal information. On the support services, we have the hot desk. We offer a physical space here at our location in Beijing. You can come for a period up to 2 weeks. It will help you to, when you're trying to enter the market, do a marketing research. You can use our facilities, get in touch with our experts, and try to get a grasp of the market. We are also doing briefings. If you come to China with a delegation or just your company, we'll be very happy to meet you. And also we do organize matchmaking and networking events. All these services are accessible if you log into our website and register. The registration and the membership for the EU SME Center is free for all European small and medium enterprise and their intermediaries. So getting into today's webinar, it's a webinar on biomass energy sector, and today we have with us Gianluca Jara. So a brief introduction about Gianluca. He's been for almost 10 years in China, and he has experience in the renewable energy and environmental protection in this market. So for 4 years he has been working as a senior project manager in the Sino-Italian cooperation program for environment protection, and where he managed a large amount of projects in different fields, mostly in bioenergy like biogas, biomass, solid waste management, but he also was engaged in other projects like wastewater management and heavy metal control areas. For the last 5 years, he's been the managing director at GIA Power, which is a consultancy company active in the environmental protection and renewable energy fields, and they are particularly active in the fields of bioenergy, heavy metals control, air quality, emissions control, waste management, and water engineer. Gianluca is recently been elected at the European Union Chamber of Commerce as a vice chair for the Renewable Energy Working Group. So with no further ado, I will have Gianluca to start with his presentation.
So, good afternoon and good morning to everybody, according to the time zone we are following. Thank you very much, Javier, for your nice introduction. Again, my name is Gianluca Chiara, and for me it's a pleasure to be today your speaker in this webinar. I will try my best in order to provide you a general introduction about the actual situation of the biomass energy sector in China. Let's start introducing you the agenda. we will have a short introduction about the renewable energy situation in China. Then we will have the second part talking more about exactly the biomass energy sector in China. I will focus on four main sectors: biogas, biomass, waste to energy, biofuel. Then we will move to the third part, let's say more the business part, where I will try to introduce you the latest news in terms of biomass technology utilization, market opportunities, market barriers, and then I will try my best to give you some useful contacts and information in order to develop your business. We will end, of course, with the usual conclusion. So, in order not to waste too much time, let's start with the introduction. As you all know, China is facing a great change in terms of economy and from also a social point of view. I mean, it was the news from, let's say, I think 2 or 3 days ago. Financial Times said that China probably this year will become the first economy in the world. We have to think that China started this movement from 30 years ago, so it's a great change. In order to do this, of course, China is raise a lot its energy consumption. We know very well that China relies a lot on coal. In terms of energy consumption, coal represents almost 70%. But it's also true that during the last 15 years, China is providing a lot of funds and is starting a lot of national projects in order to introduce renewable energy technology. According to the Chinese Statistical Yearbook, as you can see from the slide, the annual average growth in terms of investment from the Chinese government is reaching 60%, so an enormous amount. As we can see from this slide, we can see China energy demand, how it's growing through the years. It's impressive. From late 80s, China was almost close to the zero, as we can see. In only basically 30 years, we are living it now as living in China. China reached the same level of US, but what is even more impressive is that this trend is not expressed to slow down. Instead, it's going to grow till an enormous amount, as we can see, towards the 2030. In this slide, we can see Chinese energy production. I think that it's pretty clear. China, of course, I said it before, and I'm sure you know, rely a lot on coal. Rely, of course, also in oil and gas, but is also pushing a lot in order to introduce renewable energy. We can see from this slide, in particular, the green color, so exactly our area, the one we are going to talk today, the biomass energy sector, represent a great opportunity and a great area of work and development. So,
thank you, Gianluca. Sorry to interrupt you, but before you continue, I would like to launch a poll for our attendees. So we would like to know a little bit more about what their business in China. So what we are asking today is in which state is your business in China, and we have four different answers. Like if you already have an operations in China in the green tech, if your clients are looking for opportunity and that's why you're interested in this webinar, if you are already in the first step to enter the market, or if you are not in the market, you have no operations and you're just considering. So we will give the attendees 1 more minute to make a votation, and then we can comment on the results. So yeah, we'll close it now, and I will share with you the results. So we have a little bit of everything. There's only 30% that with no operations, and the rest of the participants, they already are at some stage in their development of the business in China. So yeah, thank you very much, and I will let Gianluca to continue.
So thank you very much. I will try to manage my speech also according to this pool, of course. So let's go on. Let's start, let's say officially, this webinar talking about the biomass energy sector in China. Okay. First of all, I would like to provide you some legislative framework. In this slide, you can see basically the most important laws and regulation on the biomass energy sector. I would like to highlight your attention in particular on two. The one approved from the National People Congress in December 2009, the Renewable Energy Law. It represents definitely the most detailed law on the renewable energy sector, in particular also on the biomass sector, of course. And then I would like to draw your attention on the last one, approved from the National Energy Administration in July 2012, the Biomass Energy Development 12 5-year plan. I think that it's important to highlight the fact that right in this period, NEA, together with the most important minister involved in this sector, the Minister of Environment, the Minister of Agriculture, Mohud, and so on, they are drafting the new biomass roadmap. And we are expecting that to be finalized within this year. In this slide, instead, I highlighted the latest news, the latest updated news on the sector that we had in 2013. What is interesting about this slide is the fact that, as you can see, all different central governmental bodies are involved. In the first one, the State Council, then the State Forestry Administration, NEA, and NDRC. But we could find also example of, for instance, the Minister of Agriculture like the Minister of Environment. This to explain the fact that, as you probably know, especially the one that are already having operation in China, to follow the last updated news on any sector, in particular this one, is very difficult because there are many ministers involved, and so for a small medium enterprise that doesn't have usually dedicated people every day looking for the latest news, it's very difficult to catch up with the right information. And this, of course, is an example only of the central bodies. Then there are also the latest regulation approved from the different Chinese provinces. Now, why we want to talk about the biomass energy sector in China? Because there's the strong feeling that, in particular, starting from next 5-year plan, the Chinese government will start to push a lot toward this sector. We know very well that in the past, Chinese government pushed to develop first the hydropower sector, then it was the time of wind and solar. There's again the feeling that starting from next year, the Chinese government will start to promote a new national campaign, projects, and provide a new fund within the whole bioenergy sector. Of course, we have seen it in the previous slide, we can read it in this one, the biomass energy potential is huge. We are talking about 500 million tons carbon equivalent. Mostly of this is coming from straw from agriculture, forest industry, biogas from livestock waste, and municipal solid waste. Now, let's start to talk in deep about every single sector we are going to discuss today. We will start from the biogas one. The biogas sector definitely is the most developed sector in China. We started to have a biogas plant in China since the late 60s and 70s. Biogas is coming essentially from different livestock farms, organic waste from multiple households, waste from the food market, kitchen waste from restaurant, or organic residue from food processing enterprise. To give you some numbers beyond the one you can see in this slide, the biogas sector in China accounts for around, of course, 50,000 household digester, 30,000 small-scale biogas plant, 4,000 large medium-sized biogas plant, almost 100,000 biogas unit in normal animal farm, 100,000 small service station. All these numbers give job to around 300,000 people and provide an annual revenue of 10 billion RMB. So we are talking about a huge market. You have biogas plant almost distributed all over the sector. I'm sorry, maybe this slide is not so clear. In this slide you can see that according to the different origin of livestock, pig, cattle or poultry, how is the origin of livestock of biogas plant into the country. What is important to say, especially for you that want to develop a business in China, is that so far in this sector, as in all the others, China didn't apply the best technology, the one we have in Europe. In China, you have any kind of company, from very big state-owned company involved in this sector towards the most, from very small company, for instance, with a good local connection. The point is that in China, so far the best technology has not been applied yet because in particular private investors are very concerned about initial investment. We have to take into account the fact that in China there is a law that says that only 500 kilowatt installed electricity capacity is the minimum requirement by the grid companies to let the biogas produce electricity to be connected to the grid. Now, as you can understand easily, a household digester, a small-scale biogas plant, but even the large, medium-sized biogas don't reach this level. So, of course, usually wherever investor is trying to slow down the investment towards the technology. Now, to give you some number again, when we talk about large, medium-size, when we talk about large, medium-size plant, we talk about net volume digester of around 1,000 cubic meter. When we talk about medium size, we talk about a net volume digester of around 100 to 1,000 cubic meter. Now, in order to overcome this issue, the Chinese government is trying to promote the so-called centralized biogas plant. These are very big plants, and of course they reach the target of 500 kilowatt for installed electricity capacity. Now, the problem relies on the fact that these plants, as they are very big, they need, first of all, a very huge initial investment because they use a pretty good technology. But moreover, they need a lot of waste. And of course, the waste and the collection of the waste is very expensive. This is the reason why so far we have very few centralized biogas plants in China, and of course those that have been built only from big state-owned enterprise. Now, let's move forward to the biomass sector. The biomass sector, as the biogas sector, is a sector pretty much developed in China. Again, also in this sector is pretty well distributed toward the territory. We will see it in the next slide. And you have from very small plant to pretty big one, controlled also in this case usually from the big state-owned company. For big plant, I'm talking about plants that can reach even 20-30 megawatts. So very, very big plant, especially because we know that in Europe we have a tradition of building very small, on the contrary, biomass plant. When you talk about waste, of course, in China, as in Europe, we have mainly two kinds of waste: agriculture waste and forestry waste. The agriculture waste essentially is coming from crop straw, rice husk, corn cobs, or biogas from food processing, rather than the forestry waste is coming essentially from harvesting and wood processing, forest management, small branches, or municipal green forest. Also in this case, what is important to say is that you have different kind of Chinese player into the market, which means you have, of course, the big state-owned company, or let's say the so-called private Chinese company but connected to the state-owned company that, of course, run the big range of the market and have also can get the best contracts. But you have also a middle-level range of company, Chinese small-medium enterprise, engineering company, pretty well connected in specific area, which whom European small-medium enterprise can have a good opportunity in developing cooperation and consequently business. From this slide, we can see the distribution of biomass plant in China. The difference we can see among, for instance, the biogas area is that biomass plants are pretty much more distributed in the northeast center provinces. So we are talking about from Heilongjiang, Jilin, but then also the Anhui, Shandong, and Henan. This happens because, in particular, in the Laspi province, first of all, you have a huge amount of cultivation of corn, wheat, but also of fruit tree plantation. A news I didn't know when I arrived to China, for instance, is that in Shandong you can find the largest plantation of apple tree in the world. And consequently, in Shandong is full of biomass plant. Now, or like for the biogas area, the biomass technology in China is pretty good technology. We are not at the first stage. This is important to know, especially for the one that want to enter into this market. But like the biogas sector, the technology used is not the best one and the very specific one as we have in Europe. This for many reasons. First of all, we have seen in the previous slide, the feed-in tariff in the biogas sector is not very attractive, we have to be honest. We have only a kind of 0.25 RMB per kilowatt hour of feed-in tariff. If you develop biomass plant in remote area or center-west provinces of China, the local government might provide you an added feed-in tariff to be decided from time to time, but again, is not so much in order to attract investment of private sector. The second reason is the problem to collect the waste. When usually we do a business plan on a biomass plant in Europe, we know that the collection activity should be within 50 kilometers. Well, in China, the collection activity usually reach 100 to 200 kilometers. So the collection and consequently the organization of the collection is very complicated and expensive. The third reason is the cost. Sometimes there is the wrong assumption that the biomass waste in China is cheap. I can tell you, because it happened to me, I was surprised about that when I did my first project in this area, the waste is pretty expensive. The good quality waste, it will cost you from 400 to 600 RMB per ton. I mean the good trimming from fruit tree, for instance. The cheapest one, it will cost you 200 to 300 RMB per ton, but we talk about low quality like municipal green forest. So for all this reason, we have the huge development of the biomass sector, but the technology used, again I repeat, is not the best. Let's move to the waste-to-energy sector. The difference among the last two sectors is that, so waste-to-energy, biofuel, is that, as you probably know, this sector have not been exploited yet. In the past, China relied a lot on landfill, and for landfill I usually mean a simple way of dumping the waste, not sanitary landfill. But the problem is that most of the landfills now are full. In the last 20 years, the Chinese government started to add to the landfill a normal incinerator. So they were first burning the waste in order to reduce the volume, as is normal, and then dump again. But recently, they started to build more and more waste-to-energy plants, especially in order to produce, of course, heating and electricity. Of course, this area is an area with huge opportunity. We have to think that China represents 1/4 of the total amount of garbage in the world. Even though you have to think that in China there are 1.3 billion people living, only calculating a daily production of 0.3, 0.4 kilo per day is a huge amount of waste that can be treated. To give you some number, according to the last statistical data received from Mohud, that is the minister in this case in charge, only within 2 years they are planning to build almost 400 new waste-to-energy plants. These will be mainly built around big cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Chongqing, Chengdu, Shenzhen, or in the on the east provinces, which are the most developed in China. Now, looking at, again, the problem to develop a waste-to-energy plant in China, well, there are many reasons why it's difficult. Mainly, the big problem is given from the composition of the waste. We can see in the figure 2 in this slide. The point is that in China there is a vast informal sector that extracts the most easily burned trash like paper, wood and plastic. Consequently, the remaining composition is largely organic waste, which is too wet to be burned without costly pretreatment and fuel supplements. Consequently, again, to give you some number, the average caloric value of the Chinese waste is around 3,000 to 6,000 kilojoules per kilo, which is less than half than the quality of our waste in Europe, which goes from 8,000 to 15,000 kilojoules per kilo. Moreover, you have to take into account that also in this sector, the opportunity of direct revenue are not that much high. Again, some numbers. You will get probably 30 to 40 RMB for each ton of municipal solid waste treated, and you will get around 0.95 RMB for each kilowatt hour of electricity provided to the grid. So again, as you can see, we have a number that great opportunity of the market, of course, but so far not numbers that can really attract the investment of Chinese private sector. Let's go now to the biofuel part, the last sector. Also, this sector has not been developed yet that much. In this case, we are talking both about ethanol and biodiesel. In the past, China gives some subsidy in order to have a new plantation of plants like jatropha in order to have ethanol, but this has been stopped because there was the quarrel that this plantation were going to have a conflict with the land that could be used for normal agriculture. We have to take into account that in China there is not a lot of land and there are many people that need to eat every day. Consequently, the whole sector cannot run without government subsidy or specific mandatory program. Moreover, it is said that any new biofuel development should not compete with crops intended for human consumption and land use for crop production. In fact, the Minister of Agriculture stated that any new biofuel plantation should be done in the so-called marginal land. Now, it's not very clear what does it mean a marginal land. It is said that they include saline land, sheep hillside, or again, any other land not given for agriculture purpose. In this slide, you can see the distribution of the plants from ethanol and biodiesel within Chinese territory. You will notice immediately the difference that in this sector most of the plants are distributed in the center-south of China and not like the biomass sector, the center-north. This essentially because of their proximity to grain production. Now, most of you will hear that the biofuel sector is mostly controlled from Chinese private enterprise. This is true in a certain point. Now, it's true that the Chinese biodiesel industry is dominated by small-scale operator using animal fats or waste cooking oil as feedstock. This is true. But when you talk about a big player, there's a little bit a difference we have to clarify. For instance, the three biggest Chinese companies involved in this sector are the Jilin Ethanol Company, the Heilongjian Alcohol Company, and the Anhui Biochemical Company. Three different companies, three different names, all three private Chinese enterprise. Now, all these three companies have as their own main shareholder the same company, which is China Agri, which is the China's largest fuel ethanol producer and listed company, which is the technical arm of COFCO, which is China's biggest and most important state-owned company in the agriculture sector. So this is just an example, but we could do that also in the other case, we can do it later on, of how it's important to dig from the surface when you deal with any sector, in particular the biomass energy sector in China. We saw the problem that usually small medium enterprise have in understanding local legislation, and we can see now how it's difficult for a small medium enterprise to understand, let's say, the Chinese market from a commercial point of view. I think this could be the right hint for us to move to the third part.
Thank you, Gianluca. Sorry to interrupt you again, but I would like to launch a poll before we continue. Now you make an overview of the different sectors. So what I want to ask our audience is like where they see that there are going to be more opportunities for their business to grow. They believe it's in biogas, biomass, waste to energy, or biofuel. So the pool is now open for them to vote, and let's see the results. Yeah, we have also another one question from John Campos. We will use this time to answer. Like he wanted to us to repeat the numbers of how many biogas plants are in China and how many of them are big, medium, or small. If you can answer that while we have the pool, that will be great. Gianluca.
Yes. I will repeat immediately. Another thing I would like to clarify, of course, as we said, most of you living and working in China know this issue. I would say more for, of course, the people listening from Europe. It's very difficult in China to have reliable statistics. You will read different documents issued from different ministers on the same issue, and you will read different numbers. You will see that China introduced different numbers in terms of funds, or in terms of production, or in terms of plant, and so on. This is not just to cover myself, of course, but is it true? So I will give you again the numbers I found, but don't get them as granted, of course. So the numbers that I found are this one. 50,000 household digester. Then in case, I don't know if there's an email that can be sent, yes, of course. 30,000 small-scale biogas plant. 4,000 large, medium-sized biogas plant. Around 100,000 biogas unit in normal animal farm, and 100,000 small service station. These are the numbers.
Thank you very much, Gianluca, and don't worry, John, we will send you this information by email. And now I will share the results of the poll. So we see that 43% of the audience is looking for projects in waste to energy, and then we see very few in biofuel, and then a good fair amount in biogas and biomass. So the next part of the presentation, well, Gianluca will focus on the market trends and then also challenges and opportunities, so he will try to focus on those specific sectors. Thank you, Gianluca.
Yes. So let's go on, exactly. Again, I will try to focus on this pool in my presentation. What is important to say is that this, again, will provide you these numbers. In the near future, Chinese government is expected to continue to provide some low subsidy on basic technology like biogas, pelleting, and fuel ethanol. In the next future, in the midterm target, Chinese government is expected to provide high subsidy, but only for very specific technology like synfuel from gasification or biochemical engineering. In the long-term target, but this is of course just an assumption, the Chinese government will try to develop new technology, for instance algae technology or H2 production. Now, let's try to visualize all this technology in one slide from a timing point of view and from a maturity frame point of view. What I would like to emphasize is that the development of any technology in China, it follows the direction of the government. So is a top-down introduction, is not a bottom-up introduction. So it's not the market that decide how useful or good is a technology, is the government. This is fundamental because a lot of time some company might do the mistake to think that I have a good technology or I have a good equipment, is right for Chinese market needs it, and I jump into the Chinese market. Is correct, but not totally. You have also to verify if the government is pushing and is giving funds towards that area. Keep in mind that the biomass energy sector is still pretty much controlled from the government, and most of the most important projects are still totally or partially governmental funded. Usually how it works, the government in the 5-year plan decided to develop specific technology in one area. Then they define which minister is in charge to do it, and they provide the fund. Consequently, the minister decides which research academy or big state-owned company is in charge to develop the so-called exactly engineering demonstration site. If they understand that the technology is useful and the Chinese company have enough R&D in order, of course, somehow to control the market, let's say that clearly, we move to the industry demonstration side and finally to the commercialization. So again, I would like to emphasize this issue. It's important always to look at how the government is moving and towards what, in order to avoid to waste a lot of time and, of course, money. Now, move on and let's try to understand the possible market opportunity that small medium enterprise have in this sector. Of course, there are many. I tried to emphasize it through the line all over the presentation. The technology used in China so far is not the best. Even though the biomass or the biogas sector are pretty well developed, the technology introduced from Chinese company cannot be compared with the European company. When we talk about waste to energy or biofuel, the situation is even worse. Of course, my understanding is that we are all European small medium enterprise, so I'm mainly talking about the technology in the hand of medium-sized Chinese company. It's evident that big state-owned company have a very pretty much developed R&D, but of course for European small medium enterprise it's not easy to start a cooperation with this big giant energy company. Rather than we have a big opportunity introducing advanced technology in all the four sectors, trying to cooperate with, again, medium, large size Chinese companies. So what is important for you is, of course, to find the right niche of sector where you can find interest from local partners. In this slide, I tried to make a list of the possible business opportunity that you might have in this area. Besides the listed one, I would say that, for instance, as I can see also from the pool, when you talk about the biomass sector, there are very few Chinese companies that have a huge experience in constructing dedicated boiler. For instance, there is only one very famous Chinese company, the Wuxi Guanghua Boiler Company, that can build a dedicated straw boiler. Most of the people are interested in the waste-to-energy sector, while in this area, for sure, there is a great opportunity and interest towards our experience, for instance, and in having new solution in order to understand how, for instance, to slow down the cost of the pretreatment phase. Moreover, especially in the waste management, there is a huge interest because, as I said before, the Chinese company don't know exactly how to divide and how to control the waste that should go into the waste-to-energy plant.
Thank you for this comment, because this just was one of the questions from one of our attendants, from Maximilian. He was asking what about, he seems that there is a huge potential in separating organic waste to be used for biomass, and because there is a higher caloric value. And so what are your suggestions there? You have any specific advice?
Well, it's very difficult to say that. I mean, in the terms that, of course, there is a huge opportunity. My personal experience, what I can tell you, is that I did, of course, more projects, for instance, in the waste management and treatment rather than in the building, in providing the drawing, because we are in a consulting engineering company. We don't build actually the plant, in giving the real drawing for the waste-to-energy plant. This is particularly evident because, as I was saying before, the point in China is this one. When you talk about fuel supplements in the waste-to-energy plant, most of the time you use coal. Moreover, as I was telling you, the technology used is not the best. So, as you probably know, Chinese people are much against the opening of any waste-to-energy plant. You can read it a lot of time even on Chinese newspaper, and most of the time they succeed. It happened to me. We were trying to be consultant for the Changping district, which is the most northern district in Beijing, and we didn't arrive even to present our proposal. Of course, we were not the only one, but because the people were so against that at the end the local district decided to stop the project. So I think that huge potential in the waste-to-energy plant there is in reducing cost for the whole pretreatment phase, and moreover in order to provide good technology in order to control air emission. This is a key issue in the development of a waste-to-energy plant. Why? Because the biggest plant, so far the biggest waste-to-energy plant in China are far away from, they are very big and they are far away from the municipality. But of course it's very expensive to get the waste and to treat it on site. So China, this is natural, through the time will start to understand that waste-to-energy plant can be smaller and next to the population. This also to provide and not waste a lot of heating, for instance. So my advice would be to focus on this area, reducing cost and how to control the fuel supplement and so the air pollution control. I hope I've been enough clear. This is regarding the market opportunity. Of course, in China you have a lot of market barrier, and I'm sorry for you, this part will be longer regarding the market opportunity, because I think it's correct also to be fair and say how this market is going on. First of all, you have a technical barrier. We have seen through the presentation. We have a high investment cost, but also a low productivity. Moreover, we have a lack of financial barrier. We have seen again through the presentation, the government is providing some fund, but they are not so much in order to attract private investment, not so much as in Europe or East Europe in particular. And moreover, as we are talking within EU SMEs, as we are small and we are foreigner, for us it's almost impossible to access to governmental finance. There are institutional barriers, a lack of coordination among the different governmental players involved in this sector. We said in the beginning, many laws contradict the others sometimes. There is a lack of mechanism in order to attract the player and to involve the different players, Chinese and foreigner, within this sector. Then we have policy barrier. Of course, unclear, unsupportive government laws and regulation, and moreover, not yet a clear national strategy. Finally, there is the issue of protecting your IPR, but we will talk more about this issue later on. In this area, you see the most important player on all the sector when you develop any biomass plant or project all over the world. This is not different in China. What I would like to emphasize is that you have to be careful about, in particular, 4 relationships. The relationship between the farm and the fuel collector, the collector and the plant investor, the investor and probably you, the engineering company, and the investor and or the engineering company as the local government. What is fundamental to understand is that you as engineering company will have to be ready to adapt to many different environments. The relationship among all these players change a lot according to the kind of technology you are trying to develop, the kind of course of project you are developing, big or small, the area where you are developing. The dialogue you will have with local government official is completely different if you are in a very well-developed province in the east of China or you are developing your project in a small town in West Province. So what is fundamental in developing any project, any cooperation in China is to be flexible. Here,
thank you, Gianluca. Before we go further, I would like to ask you a question. because you're talking about the market barriers, and you also at the beginning of the presentation talk about the legislative framework. So, and you said this is difficult for SMEs, so I would like you, if possible, what do you think they should be looking at? What kind of information is key for them to understand, and what they should be looking at?
Okay, I will try, also because the time is limited, to reply to this question using this slide. I think it's pretty correct. What they should look at. I mean, let's see it from our side, then I will go on the Chinese side. From European side, I always try to push European company already established in China or newcomer to have a strong dialogue with EU SME Center, the European Chamber, and the China APR SME Help Desk. I don't say that because I cooperate with them. I started to cooperate with them because I noticed how useful they were for all the European companies present in China. Here you can find people that can give you suggestions, help in order to understand the market, sometimes for free, some even legal advice. Of course, they cannot help you to develop your business, but they can give you some practical information in order to not waste too much time. This is the first advice I would give. The second advice, try to be practical. Here I listed, for instance, some website of the most important minister involved in the sector, NEA, the Minister of Environmental Protection, the Minister of Agriculture. My personal experience, again, I talk for personal experience, don't get me wrong, maybe other people will tell you other stuff, is that for European small medium enterprise it's almost impossible to create a stable dialogue with such important and big central government player. My recommendation is that, first of all, it's fundamental to find a stable and reliable partner in China. In China, you can develop your business in the moment you work with Chinese. But for a small medium enterprise, I would recommend to try to develop more, establish a dialogue and cooperation with, for instance, a Chinese university, or for instance with Chinese Research Academy, here I listed CRIS, or with industry association. There are people very much aware about the market, they know how the market is going on, and moreover they are much more reliable and willing to talk with foreigner and to establish cooperation with foreigner. And especially when you will talk with research academy or industrial association, probably there you will find also some business opportunity. Practical example, when we talk about, you can be even a member about a Chinese industrial association. They're not just for Chinese player. And the quota you will have to pay in 1 year is only 10,000 to 50,000 RMB, and you will have the opportunity to participate to their meeting and to their national congress, for instance, and so on. So this is the very practical advice I would like to give you in this short time. These are the very short list, of course, of the most important Chinese company involved in this sector. I just highlight the National Bioenergy Group, which is the most important company in the biomass sector. And as you were very interested about the waste-to-energy sector, I will highlight the China Everbright International Company, that is the biggest company within this sector. Now, as the time of the end is coming, I will try to wrap up what we have been telling so far in our conclusion. Again, for sure, the Chinese market can provide you a huge amount of opportunity. I strongly believe that starting from next 5-year plan, the Chinese government will start to focus more and more towards this sector. So European SMEs have a great opportunity ahead. Of course, when you work in the Chinese market, you have to take into account many aspects. Here I listed which I personally believe are the 6 biggest problem that a European SME accounts when comes into the Chinese market. The fact that, for instance, Chinese believe that your best technology is the cheapest one. For the one already in this market, they know very well what I'm talking about. Chinese, I told you in the beginning, are very much scared about initial investment. So I would always recommend to any small medium enterprise in any meeting first to present your best reliable technology, then once you got their attention to step up and present the most updated one. There is the contract barrier. I always recommend any small medium enterprise to do things from legally and following the contract according to Chinese law. The big problem is that once you sign the contract, your work is not done. Actually, it's starting, because a lot of Chinese players are not keen to follow exactly the terms of the contract. In that case, I follow the same recommendation I'm giving you. Be practical, be flexible, and always try to keep a good dialogue with your counterpart. You will always or almost always find a solution. Chinese are not keen to pay consultancy. I work for an engineering consulting company. I know what doesn't mean. So also in this case, be practical. Your consultancy will have to help them to reduce cost or improve their productivity in terms of numbers or quality. A win-win solution is always to match your engineering solution with a manufacturing solution. This will attract your possible Chinese partner. Remember that China is a very variegated market. We said since the beginning. So don't run around China looking for a partner. We are a small medium enterprise. We have to control our budget. You have to do a very important initial marketing strategy. Understand, as I was telling you in the beginning, if China is ready or not for your solution, then in which area, so in which province, and which could be your partner. Then attack the market. So work first in order not to have problem afterwards. Remember to localize your product. Unfortunately, too many times I heard words like, it's 20, 30 years, I work in this area, I'm an expert, I've been working in Europe, in Africa, in India maybe, and so now I come to China and I will explain them this technology or how it works, this equipment. This is wrong in China. Again, Chinese like people flexible. So, of course, you have to keep straight towards your experience, but be ready always to localize your product, so to modify a little bit your solution according to what the Chinese client required. Again, protect your IPR. As I was telling you before, there is the EU SME Center here ready also to help you on this side. And the EU SME IPR Center. The final thoughts, China is undergone a huge social and economic change. Don't make the mistake that a lot of time you will hear is that for foreigner it's impossible to develop a business in China. But don't make the mistake, the opposite mistake, thinking that China is an easy market. China is not an easy market. Actually, it's a very difficult one and can be very cruel towards the ones that are not well equipped for it. So, European SME can play an important role, and I truly believe that they can play an important role in the bioenergy sector. But this can happen only if you have a very good knowledge about this market. I will leave you with this slide. You have listed the most important exhibition for the year in this area. I hope that the webinar was enough interesting for you all, and thank you very much.
Thank you indeed very much to you, Gianluca. It was a very interesting webinar. It's clear that you're an expert in the field. And unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I just have one question for you, and it will be like, through your experience, what will be it's a good way, positive way to manage your relationship with local government here?
This is a very difficult question. I was telling you before. Again, I will talk according to my experience. When you talk with a governmental official in Beijing or in a developed city, for instance, Zhejiang province, for those that don't know, is probably the most developed province in China, is very different than talking with a local official in a small county in the west of China. And I'm not talking about language, English or Chinese. I'm talking about mentality. So the point is that to keep in mind and to try to understand how much the people in front of you, for instance, has experience of what we are talking about. Keep in mind that a lot of time you will meet officials that probably are not expert in that sector. They were moved in, for instance, in the Environmental Protection Bureau a few years before. So you have to explain them your idea and what you want to develop. This is the first issue. Another thing I would like to point out, because it can be a tricky issue, is to be very careful about what the local government might offer you in order to develop a project. You have to be very careful because in China, in particular in rural areas, they try to propose you some discount in buying a land or some kind of tax-free area just because they wish you to invest in that area. Why? Because maybe they wish to start the project because they want to improve their position and go to a bigger city. Be very careful about this kind of proposition and always double check if their propositions are legal or not. If they are not legal, I would recommend to be very careful because I know how attractive is the point to see maybe the contract there, maybe finally I can finalize a project. But the shortcut today will bring you to a long amount of problem afterwards, especially because maybe the official that makes the proposal will change and the new one doesn't keep the word. So my point is always find a reliable player, make important study about the proposal you might have. Of course, be very flexible, and in China, in order to end in a happy way, be ready also to drink a lot of baijiu, that is the local alcohol, because in China, drinks and dinners are very important to create a good communication.
Thank you very much, Gianluca. Finally, we don't have time for more, so I just want to remind you that tomorrow we will have a webinar on energy efficient market for EU SMEs in China. This has been done by Carl Upson Hooper from he's the General Counsel of Green Stream Network. And on 14th of May we will have the start a smart metering and smart grid in China by James Law, CEO of GSL Consulting. And I'm very happy also to announce that we will upload the update of the Green Tech report that was actually done by you, Gianluca. We will have this report this week, so you can have a look at it, and there will be updated figures and very good information on the green tech sector. So thank you very much. We are doing also a roadshow in Hungary, in Spain, and in Poland, so check our website. If you're in those countries, we'll be very happy if you join our events. Thank you very much, and have a good day ahead.
Thank you. Bye-bye.